What's up, guys? Kevin here, and a lot of you are probably hearing about the new 25% tariffs on aluminum and steel, but in actuality, if you look at the history of this, you'll realize that the policy was implemented several years ago, then it was pulled back, and now it's simply being re-implemented. So it's one of those things. I think if you look into the details, you can definitely get a better picture of how this works simply because we've been here before, we've tried it before, and there are, of course, reasons why this worked and also reasons why it's not going to be the best for everybody. So in this video, I just wanted to share with you some of that background, some of the pros and cons to help you form your own opinion on how this is going to go in the future and maybe just give you a little bit of insight on what we can expect moving forward. So let's go ahead and talk about it. So this all started back in March of 2018. And yes, this started 7 years ago, almost to the month when this was originally implemented. The way it started is we had a 25% tariff on steel and a 10% tariff on aluminum. And this was based on the value of the product. So whatever was being imported, they would consider the value and take a tariff or tax on that as an importation fee. Now, in this policy, there were a lot of extra considerations just to make sure it didn't hurt the American economy. So, for example, if there were certain materials that were in high demand, but we weren't able to produce a high enough volume inside of the United States, it would provide exceptions to import materials like that. But generally speaking, if raw material, aluminum or steel was brought into the United States, it would incur an additional fee in those tariffs of either 10 or 25%. Now, an analysis was done before this plan was originally kicked off, and they basically determined that the utilization percentage of American produced steel and aluminum was in the 70s, but by introducing this policy, it raised it up over 80%. So it did seem like it had a net positive benefit to promote buying more of your raw material from companies in the United States. However, over time, they were allowed to make exemptions to certain countries based on other agreements that were made. So different teams would meet with other countries and come up with new policies on how they wanted to handle these tariffs moving forward. And basically over time, about 5 years or so, they took the tariffs off of several different countries. And that includes Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, countries in the EU, Japan, Mexico, South Korea, the United Kingdom, and Ukraine. So all of these countries qualified to basically be exempt from these extra tariffs on any metals that were being imported into the United States from those countries. It was also determined that countries were attempting to bypass the tariffs by turning the raw steel and aluminum into actual products. So tubing or something that is primarily steel or aluminum, and they would basically do the manufacturing or fabrication and then ship it over as an end component, and that would not receive the same tariffs as raw aluminum or raw steel. So basically you're still importing raw aluminum or steel from these other countries, but because you're turning it into a new product, it wouldn't face the same tariffs as, just rods and stuff like that. So that was something that we noticed. And then eventually, of course, that US utilization rate of steel and aluminum began to decline again back to the rates that it was in 2018. So what's being done now? Well, we're going back to the original plan plus some. Basically, the current administration determined that the original plan was not only ineffective, but also too easily bypassed or changed. So they wanted to eliminate that completely. So for steel, we're re-implementing the 25% tariff on all steel coming in from all of the countries that had exemptions, as well as basically anywhere else. They're also re-implementing the 10% tax on aluminum and then increasing the tax to 25% as well. So now we've got a 25% tariff on raw steel and raw aluminum. Now the policy is also being updated to not only compensate for raw aluminum and steel, but also fabricated or produced aluminum and steel to, a modified component. So even if they're turning it into something else that we're buying as an end item, it's still going to face the same tariffs if it's primarily aluminum or steel. And so the way that it works is there is a long list of items that can be imported into the United States. And if you're shipping something, you're supposed to identify what category it falls into on that list so they can determine what material it is, if it faces a tariff or needs to be inspected or anything when it goes through customs. So they're not only going to have the same steel and aluminum line items on there, but they're also going to have different products. So They might have exhausts or, just different things that you can turn that metal into as a product will also be accounted for on the tariff list. Now, one key thing they're adding here is there will be an exemption for products that are produced using steel or aluminum that was imported from the United States. So if we had aluminum or steel that we shipped over to, say, the United Kingdom, and they put it into a press and stamped out car parts and then shipped it back to the United States, that would not face the 25% tariff. Only products that are being fabricated in other countries and using raw materials from that country will face the additional 25% tariff. And even crazier, there is a 200% tariff on products coming from Russia. So if you get aluminum from Russia, it's not going to be 25% tariff, it's going to be 200%. Now, with all of this in place, they're hoping to get back to where things were going in 2018, but that means that nobody can change it anymore. So they've actually removed the secretary's capability to create agreements with other countries and revert any of these tariffs with individual countries. The only person that'll be able to do it from now on is the president himself. So you can actually see in the policy document where it had all the exemptions year by year, month by month for any of the countries that they came to an agreement with. That is all going to be superseded by this statement saying that starting on March 12th, there is going to be a 25% tariff universally. Any imported steel or aluminum is going to have that tariff. Now, the last thing this policy implements is making sure that tools are provided to the custom agents that will be reviewing any imported materials so they can determine what is aluminum and what is steel, and also determine the aluminum and steel content. Because even if it is a product that is just made with aluminum or steel, it can still face that tariff based on how much aluminum or steel is in the product. So they need a way to measure it or calculate the value of the metal in whatever's coming in so they can put a tariff on it. And like always, they say they'll continue to monitor how this works. And if any changes need to be made or amendments need to be added in the future, they of course will do that. So again, this is basically looking at the policy that was implemented in 2018 that was reverted and now re-implementing it with additional requirements on top to make it as strong and last as long as possible. Now, the key thing I think people should realize is this is not primarily made for the individual. This is made for companies. This is made to promote buying American and working with American companies that produce steel and aluminum in our country. And you can actually see all of these rave reviews coming from other associations and businesses that do exactly that. Of course, they are very happy to see this new change. But for majority of us just being consumers, this mainly means everything is going to get more expensive because you kind of have two options here. You can pay the extra tariff, which makes imported materials more expensive, or you can buy American, which is generally more expensive. And that is going to, of course, transfer to the end customer when they actually want to buy the product. So just like everything, it kind of has pros and cons. If you are working for a company or own a company that produces these metals, then yes, you should hopefully have more business and more people shopping with you, even though it's not 100% a guarantee. Based on what we saw in 2018, it was able to increase how much people were utilizing American companies for their raw material supply. But if you're an end user, anything that you buy for building materials, if you're modifying a home or buying a car, anything like that, it's going to make it more expensive. Even plastic stuff will be affected by this. Everything from cell phone cases to toys to anything you could think about is going to be affected by these tariffs, because the way that you make a plastic part works is it is made in a steel mold. So they're working with a tool shop to make these plastic parts that either buys their raw steel from American companies or they buy it from overseas companies. Or maybe they're working with a tool shop in China. But basically, if you're buying stuff from a company that's already buying American, it'll stay the same. If you're buying stuff from a company that's working with imported materials, it's going to be more expensive. So there really aren't going to be any ways to make this cheaper for the end customer by adding on these laws. It's mostly just to support the economy so that these businesses get more business. So yeah, we'll see how this goes this year. Definitely things are going to change. And like I've said in my previous videos, I'll reiterate, inflation is just kind of a natural trend. There's nothing that can stop it at this point. The only thing that you can try to do is slow it down. So this will definitely have an effect on how inflation grows in America, but time will tell if it makes it grow faster or slows it down. So we'll just kind of see how this goes. But otherwise, I think that's all we had to talk about today. So thank you guys for stopping by. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.